Any movements by George Zimmerman to accomplish that? Or was it just sort of a struggle that you saw him trying to get up?
I couldn't see anyone when I first went out there until he slid out from where I could actually see him a little bit. And that's when I knew it was a second person, and that's when I figured the person on the bottom was trying to get up.
When was the first time that you noticed Mr. Zimmerman's clothing?
Just as I just stated.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Just as I just stated right before, in that very initial.
Okay, and then you could see that he was wearing red?
It was a different color than the person on top was wearing, yes, red or white.
So, going through now for a moment your statements and who you first spoke with and when. You first had an opportunity to speak to, do you recall the first person that you did?
And what do you mean by speak to? First
or write out a statement or do anything?
That would have been the police.
I'm sorry?
That would have been the police.
Okay. And you recall filling out a handwritten statement yourself?
Yes.
And do you perceive any inconsistencies in your testimony today and what you wrote out on the statement?
I would say the only thing I did was clarify.
Today?
Or in any other statements that I had from that first one.
Okay. You were consistent back then that it was a straddle position where the person on top was straddling the person on the bottom in red, and the person on the bottom was getting hit, was yelling help, correct?
But I didn't mean to say that they were yelling help while they were getting hit.
Okay.
That was clarifying, and also what was being done was clarified.
Gotcha. And then you also talked to Investigator Serino.
Correct.
And that was that same day?
Later that night.
Okay. And you gave him an oral or recorded statement, correct?
Correct.
And it was in that statement the same day that you described the straddle position as being an MMA style, correct?
Correct.
And it was that very night when the words ground and pound first were talked about, correct?
Correct.
And then you also talked to the media, actually found you out, didn't they? I think next day or two?
They came to my house every day and pretty much harassed us for the next 6 months. And
until you realized, I guess, that you could close the door and not answer it, you actually answered one door knock, and they sort of had a reporter there talking to you with you behind the door. Remember that?
That was the next morning, correct?
Mm-hmm. And similarly, you told them the same thing that we've talked about here today, right? The guy on the bottom in the red was getting beat up?
Correct.
And also, as well, saying that at that point that he was yelling for help.
Correct.
Then about a month later, FDLE, John Batchelor, spoke with you at an extended interview where he went over the same information.
I had another interview in between that with Serino again.
Oh, you are right. Again, except for clarifying what was happening, no inconsistencies with the story that you gave the first night, correct?
Just clarifying.
And then we get to John Batchelor's conversation.
Correct.
He went into greater detail, correct, about what happened?
Excuse me?
He went into pretty good detail with you about what happened?
In detail of what happened from my point of view?
Exactly,
he didn't know.
yeah.
Yes.
He had to explain a lot about it?
Yes.
And again, everything in there you still stand by and was consistent with what you've told us here today and every other statement you've given, correct?
Yes.
Tell me why you initially thought that this just, why you initially thought that this may have just been a dog fight of some sort. Why did that come to mind?
Like I said, we have a lot of dogs that get walked back there. Maybe a dog got loose. I have no idea. It was Daytona 500 weekend. People were probably partying.
Any problems that you have actually in the neighborhood with dogs or dogs getting loose or anything?
Nothing out of the ordinary from just getting off the leash, maybe.
I have a moment to approach the clerk, Your Honor. Number 4. Let me show you what is in evidence as State's Exhibit 45. You can take a look at that for a moment. Do you recognize who that is?
No. Okay. Now I do. Not at the time.
Right, at the time you didn't. That person, is that the clothing that you saw that night?
I can't say it's exactly the clothing, but it was definitely a red or a lighter color.
Okay. Does that red seem like the color red that you saw on the bottom that night?
Possibly.
Okay. Just one more moment, Your Honor, almost done. Just have a moment before the clerk again, just to identify this photograph. Rather than wasting time, Your Honor, what I think I'll do is show it to him, not publish it to the jury until I identify the number, just so we can clarify that. It's in evidence, I just can't find the number just yet. I might have first the witness, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
I can take a look at this. I actually do need to mark this one out on top to show it to you. Defendant's double E for identification purposes for right now. And can you tell me, is the clothing that that person wearing similar to the clothing on the person who is on top?
The person on the right, yes.
Okay, so yeah, certainly not the 7-Eleven clerk. I apologize. The person on the in the center of the photograph.
Correct.
Person to the right. Similar clothing to the person that you saw on top on the night of
Same
February
colors,
22nd?
yes.
Thank you. Without objection, I would like to enter that into evidence room. I would not mind suggesting there's no objection. I mean, if there's no objection.
Is there any objections?
I have no objection.
Okay, that'll come in as Defense Exhibit 18. That's double E.
And I'd like to quickly dispose to the jury if I might. During your interview, you had actually prepared a sketch of what you saw that night. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Any objections to putting this in as evidence? It's simply a blow.
This is his.
That's
No objections?
No, I apologize. No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, it'll come in as Defense Exhibit number 19.
Again, may I have first,
Yes, you may.
can you identify this as a blow-up of a sketch that you prepared?
Yes, it's my horrible stick figures.
Okay, well, in addition to not knowing how long you've been married, now we know your artistic abilities, but let's do this if you would. Explain to the jury what you intended to do with this sketch and then tell us what it depicts.
What I tried to do is say where the door in the house that I came out of was, where they first were, who was on top, who was on bottom, and then where it moved to.
Okay. So to clarify, this is your patio area,
Correct.
and this was what your perspective you were looking out at this scene here first?
First, correct.
Okay. This scene really belongs here, just later in time? Is that
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a progressive,
right?
supposedly supposed to be a progressive
Right.
picture.
So this is what you're looking at from here to here first?
Correct.
And from here to here second, although this path is actually the same path, correct?
Correct. And then the third one is where, away from where I saw him on the second part, the body ended up.
Okay, so tell me the legend, if you would, and explain what you were indicating with this.
This is depicting them laying how I was stating earlier, the one on the black top on top and the one on the red and white on bottom.
Okay,
And then it moves to the sidewalk, laying this way,
okay.
with still the person with the black shirt on top and the red shirt on bottom.
Okay, is this now where they're in the straddle position
Correct.
with Trayvon Martin on top?
Yeah, I could not draw that.
That's fine, but I just want to orient the jury to that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
And then tell me what this number 3 is right here.
3 is when I went upstairs while I was still on phone with 911 and looked down, and the body was, I don't know, it's not in the same position that I left him in.
Right. You left them in, they were more closer and actually had part of their bodies on the cement pathway, correct?
They were on the sidewalk, yes, and then the body was closer to where I was,
Right. And
After.
so when you looked out from, did you look out from upstairs?
upstairs.
Then you saw Trayvon Martin's body, correct? Between the pathway and your complex, your townhome.
Correct.
Okay. And I see you have, again, a stick figure. Have you seen the photographs taken of Trayvon Martin as he lay just after the shot?
I do not believe so.
Would you defer to the, do you know if, did you see anyone move the body at all?
I
after you saw
believe
it?
I saw him flip him because he was laying face down,
Okay.
flip him over and try to give him CPR.
So when you first saw him from upstairs, he was laying face down.
Correct.
Did you see the other person?
He was on the sidewalk,
Okay.
standing up.
Okay. Did you see anybody else? The man with a flashlight?
That's when the guys from the flashlights came around the corner.
Okay. So from the time of the gunshot, when you were just on the phone calling 911, to the time when you looked out to see Trayvon Martin's body in the position you just described it, and George Zimmerman, I think you said walking about, about how long was that delay?
I don't know. I'm sure if you splice the phone call, you could figure that out to the T.
Okay, so if we were to look at your phone call, you sort of acknowledge having just heard the gunshot, correct? And then you also acknowledge, I see someone outside, correct?
Correct.
And that's about the timeline that you would say was accurate as to
That's when I'm walking upstairs. Yes.
having heard the gunshot, walk upstairs. Tell me if you would, I'm sorry. Tell the jury, if you would, you hear the gunshot when you are dialing 911, then tell me your movement until you get to an area where you can see Trayvon Martin's body.
It was a walking movement upstairs as I was trying to spell out twin trees 3 times. And when I finally made it to the bathroom area is when I looked down because we have a window, and that's when I saw the body.
Okay. I'm just going to ask you to do it a little bit slower. Were you actually still on the staircase when you were dialing 911?
I was possibly heading up at that time
Up the staircase?
when I finally got a hold of him.
Okay.
Her. I
Continued
believe.
walking, got out. Did you go into one of the back bedrooms?
The master bedroom.
And is there a balcony or some window out there?
There's a window in the bathroom and a window in the actual room.
And which window did you look out?
I believe it was the bathroom window.
Okay. Again, it is what it is, but could have been one of the 2 windows.
I believe it was the bathroom window.
And we will defer the exact timing. Do you remember when you were on the phone with the 911 operator that you said something acknowledging that you had just seen the body at the time you saw it?
I don't understand the question. Can you
Yeah,
repeat
I
it?
just kept rolling on. I apologize. If we're going to listen to the 911 tape, on that tape, there's a time when you say, there's somebody outside and I think he's dead. Was that the precise moment or very close in time to when you saw the body you just described?
That's when I looked down.
And you saw it?
Correct.
So we can defer to the tape then for a pretty much exact time delay between the shot and when you saw the body.
Not the exact time the shot was fired, but from when I stated I just heard a shot when I was on the phone with him, yes.
Got it. I might have a moment. No?
Yes, ma'am.
Then just to clarify the last thing we talked about, you look out and you see Trayvon Martin's body, and then you said you saw George Zimmerman walking about, correct?
Standing, walking, yes,
Okay,
but on the
sure.
sidewalk.
And then you also said you saw 2 guys with flashlights?
I think it was 2 guys with flashlights coming around the corner.
Okay. Could you tell, in fact, that one of them was an officer?
No.
Okay.
I just saw a flashlight.
Because again, at this point, it's still quite dark out there, correct?
Correct.
I couldn't tell if you said that your porch light was on.
It was on.
Okay. Was it on the whole night?
Yes.
Okay. And it's one of those porch lights that point down, correct?
It's a light bulb inside of a globe.
Right, above, in the ceiling above.
Correct.
It's not one of these lights that illuminate the outside area, correct?
It's not a floodlight, no.
Okay. Does it illuminate outside of the porch area at all?
Maybe just a little bit.
A few feet?
I would say possibly, yes.
Certainly not enough to increase your ability to see what you've now talked about happening near the pathway, though, correct?
No.
And the voice screaming for help, however many times that you heard it, it was just one person's voice?
When I heard it outside,
Yes.
I believe it was just one person's voice, yes.
And you now believe that that was George Zimmerman's voice, correct?
I never said that.
Do
I
you
said
believe-
it could have been his, but I was not 100% sure.
I'm not asking for 100% certainty. I'm asking you to use your common sense and to tell us if you think that that was George Zimmerman's voice screaming for help, the person on the bottom.
That's just my opinion.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Have you read it right?
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I may borrow Mr. Guy's water, and may I borrow your water too? When you first saw them, sir, you saw like this, right?
Correct.
That demonstration, is this what we're talking about, right?
Correct.
You saw one person on top of the other.
Correct.
You don't know how they got there, right?
No.
The second time you saw them, one was on top of like this, but this person on top was straddled,
Correct.
right? But the feet were definitely, from your vantage point, to the right, as you drew in the diagram right here.
Feet, yes.
I apologize, yes, sir.
Heads were towards,
The heads were towards the T.
correct.
Is that correct?
The T of the sidewalk.
Yes, I apologize. The T is the
Yes.
sidewalk, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I apologize. Let me give you back your water. I think I got the right. You were asked about statements you gave, interviews you gave. Forget about the news. You originally talked to an officer, right, at the scene
Correct.
that night. Then you ended up talking to a detective later on, correct?
Correct.
And then you ended up talking to somebody from FDLE, correct?
Are you going in order of all the times
I
I
think
spoke
I've
to
got that
someone?
right. Well, I'll skip the news right now.
Okay.
Right, you talked to somebody from FDLE.
I believe I did another interview with Sereno on the phone as
I
well.
apologize. Serena on the phone, right? And then you ended up at some point talking to me, and I took a statement from you, too.
I went FDLE, then you, yes, correct.
Yes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that certain questions were not asked of you at the beginning that were asked later on in the later interviews?
New questions, correct.
Right?
Yeah.
In the first interview, you were not asked to elaborate on certain things that later on at the end you were asked to elaborate, correct?
Correct.
In other words, nobody had asked you before whether you heard this, correct?
No.
And I asked you that, correct?
Yes.
And you did not, for purpose of the record, hear that, correct?
No.
In fact, what Mr. O'Mara said, not getting into, but he actually pounded on his cement here, you did not hear that either, correct?
No.
Now, one of the interviews I believe you gave with Sereno, Mr. O'Mara asked you about ground and pound.
Correct.
Do you recall that? Could it be that it was investigator Sereno that used the words ground and pound and not you?
I believe it was me because it was in my initial statement as well.
Okay. So you initially, in the original statement to the officer, put ground and pound?
Possibly.
Okay. You know, I'm going to show you this, and may I approach the witness, Sean?
You should have it marked for an identification exhibit. Yeah, I need a paper change here.
sorry, which one? Is this for?
It's for identification. It's marked for identification purposes.
Okay, I've seen it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, press the witness. I'll show you what's been marked for identification purposes, 25.
It should be 2S.
I'm sorry, 2S, I apologize. Just read it and see if you use the words ground and pound there.
Is the proper impeachment, Your Honor? I don't know if that's what's going on, but,
I don't know if it's impeachment or recollection.
okay.
Is there an objection?
I withdraw it then until we see where it goes.
I say ground getting hit.
Okay. But would you agree that in that interview with the first officer, you did not use the words ground and pound?
It wasn't an interview, it was a written statement.
I apologize.
So by the time I probably gave my testimony to Sereno, I might have thought about that's what it looked like to give a better description.
Yes, sir. And you believe that you used the words ground and pound in the better description to Sereno, is that correct?
I believe that's better described, yes.
Okay. So you elaborated a little bit more from the
Yes.
first, correct?
I
And then you
clarified.
elaborated a little more in deposition too, correct?
I clarified,
You had to clarify certain things, would that be accurate?
yes.
And why was it? You felt it was important to clarify certain things that you had previously said or
To
elaborate?
give a better visual.
Okay. Now, let me have a moment, Your Honor.